As you become more experienced in Photoshop, you'll find that you'll use different groups of panels for performing different tasks, and it will be helpful to customize the panel locations and save them. Now, by default, we're in the Essential workspace, but of course, we can rearrange and hide and show any panels at any time. And you can see that Photoshop ships with a number of different workspaces. So for example, if you were doing some painting, you might want to switch to that workspace so that you have access to your swatches and the brush panel. If you're working on an image that has a lot of type in it, you might want to switch to the Typography workspace so that you have access to your character and paragraph panel, the styles, as well as the glyphs panel. For now, let's return back to the Essential workspace, and I'm going to show you the workspace that I actually prefer working in when I do most of my compositing. Now, instead of having the panels on the right-hand side, I actually work with the panels on the left-hand side. And the reason that I do that is because I find that over the course of the day, I'm constantly going to the different menu items across the top, and I'm selecting different tools. And then to go all the way across my monitor in order to just select a different layer takes a lot of time. So I'm going to select my Layers panel, and I'm going to drag it over to nest it next to my tools. I also use the Properties panel a lot and the History panel. So first I'll select the History panel, I'll click the icon, and then click on the History tab and nest that with my Layers panel. The Properties panel I actually want underneath my Layers panel, so I'll select the tab, drag it to the bottom of the Layers panel, and when I release my cursor with that solid cyan line down there, it will add it in its own grouping. I also use paths a lot, so I'll select the Path panel and drag that to the top to put it in its own grouping. I might add the channels to that as well. And remember, if they're in the wrong order, I can always click and drag to reorder my panels within a nested group. And then if I want to close the other panels, I can right mouse click or control click on Mac and close the tab group. I'll do the same thing here, closing the tab group, and finally, one more time, I'm just going to right mouse click and close the tab group there. So this is the way that I prefer to work in Photoshop, but of course you can set up your panels and your tools any way that you want to. When you're finished, you'll want to save that as a workspace. So from the Workspace Picker, I'll choose New Workspace, give it a name, and you'll notice that I can also capture keyboard shortcuts and menus, but we haven't set those up yet, so I'll just click Save in order to save that. And we can see that it's now added to the different workspaces that I can select from in the Workspace Picker. It's also very easy to return back to a specific workspace if, for example, I drag these two panels out. And by the way, you should know that if you drag a panel out and it's floating, you can actually drag that panel to a secondary monitor if you're working with more than one monitor. If I want to reset this, all I need to do is select the Workspace Picker and choose Reset JCost. If you ever want to delete a workspace, you can't delete the workspace that is active. So if I select delete right now, you'll notice that it won't allow me to delete the workspace that I just created. I'll click cancel, I'll choose any other workspace, and then I'll choose to delete my workspace that I just created. I'll click delete, yes, and then we can see that that JCost workspace is no longer available. And if I need to reset my essentials so that they're back to the beginning, I'll just choose Reset Essentials. One last shortcut that I just want to mention before we wrap up. When you have an iconic panel and you click on it so that it expands it, that panel will stay expanded even if you go and select a different tool. If you want that panel to automatically close when you select another tool, you can select your Preferences and then Workspace, and you can enable the Auto Collapse Iconic Panels. Now when I click OK and I select the History panel, and then I go and click on any other tool or do anything else in Photoshop, that History panel will auto collapse back to its iconic state. For now, I'll go ahead and reset that, choosing my Preferences again for Workspace, and then disabling it by unchecking it and clicking OK. So there you go. You can see how easy it is to switch between different workspaces as well as customize your own workspace and save it in Photoshop.